when we're working with the Visualis3R software, we have the ability to change the different base materials. So the substrate controls allows you to switch between a gloss coated, so this is where we are at the moment. So let's just whack that right up and you'll see we've now got this glossy effect appearing on our paper. So we're just going to bring it back down. If you are playing around with these and you can't remember where it was, you can always reset to default. The reset to default will always take you back to gloss coated. Okay, so we also have uncoated paper. So in uncoated paper, the ink is slightly absorbed. So what we're seeing here is, if you notice if you look at the CMYK colors, if you go from gloss coated, the colors are more saturated. On an uncoated, they're slightly duller, just the same as you would see if you look at the Pantone uncoated guide versus the Pantone coated. You'll see there's a difference in how that appears. So you can also fine tune that. So if you know that it's even more absorption, you can do so. So you can basically decrease the absorption of those inks. And again, as always, you can save these as presets. We also have foil substrate. Now, as you can see here, because we've got the CMYK prints on top of the foil, you then get that foil reflection coming through. So by putting cyan on top of a foil, you get metallic cyan, the same with magenta, etc. Now, the darker the ink saturation, if you look at like the violet blue colors, and the black, you'll notice how you don't get that reflectivity, and that's because they're more saturated colors don't allow the light to bounce back through off the metallic substrate. So when you're designing, it's really important to know that, because you know, if you don't know how it's going to look, you might design something, send it off to the printer does a proof, it costs a lot of money, you get it back and you think, oh, actually that looks awful, that color doesn't look very metallic at all. So at least in here you can get an idea of what colors will look right. Okay, what else do we have? Well, we have a clear material. Well, clear material is used for things like printing labels. So you might have a clear label. Now, how do we know it's clear? Well, we have the environmental controls. I'm just going to switch my environment from the grey background, which is the default color that loads. The reason we use the grey background is that it's a neutral color, so it doesn't contaminate the images on your screen. In the background, by default, it's using the indoor environment, but with a grey overlay over the top. We can switch to white and black, etc., but let's just switch that to indoor, and we can now see how that clear is working. So what we can see now is you've got the background coming through. You can see, obviously, we've got the clear label. On that clear material, you also have options to change the reflectivity and translucency. So maybe we're working with like more of like a clear type acetate material. You know, these ones that are like parchment type papers that are semi-transparent. Now at the moment, because it's semi-transparent, you've got that grayness coming in from the background, which is contaminating the look of this design. And it's not contamination, it's a realistic effect. If you're in a different room and your room's got white walls, it will look brighter. And again, this is what helps you when you're visualizing your file. What's it going to look like when it's in a certain type of room environment? What's it look like when it's outdoors? Well, is that background now brighter? Wow, yes it is. I can see through it. It's cleaner, it's brighter. It's a realistic 3D environment. What does it look like on a flat white background? Well, a white background through white paper looks white. Does it look like on a grey background or a black background? So you can see how colour and light is perceived in your designs. We also have things like glitter. So the glitter, again, as we've shown on another video tutorial, we can change the colour of the glitter. What is the base material look like? Does it look slightly darker? Is it more of a coloured glitter? So we can fine tune it. Maybe my glitter base material is more like a gold. Maybe it looks more like that, and I can change the intensity of the design, making it brighter. I can change the glitter scale. So we can fine tune all these different effects for different types of materials. We also have brush metal. So brush metal, we've got a standard brush metal in here. It's a mathematical calculation to simulate that, so basically it allows us to be able to simulate what things would look like. And then we also have plastic. So plastic, what color plastic? Well, maybe we're printing onto like a red plastic, and we've got the reflections there. Now let's just change. I prefer my indoor environment. So remember, if you have switched around, we're in the outdoor environment at the moment, and this will affect your lighting. So let's just take a look at switching it back to indoor, which is my preferred one. So switch to indoor and now switch to grey. we retain that indoor lighting, and that gives us a more of a realistic effect. Because so you've got to think about how you're positioned outside with light. When light is shining, you've got this huge bright light from the sky. It appears over everything, so you don't get this contrast like you get indoors, and that's why the realism between the two. So if we now look at changing the gloss level, you know, how glossy is that color? So we've got flat color and we've got the reflection, so we can make that plastic look kind of really reflective plastic, or more like a matte kind of plastic. So there we have them, you know, the rainbow holographic. Again, reflectivity, we can change that one here. So the rainbow hologram effect is basically to simulate the holographic rainbow materials, and you'll find that the metalness is like the grayness that comes through, so we can make it less grey as the material. We can maybe change the vibrancy down a little bit. The patchiness is the amount of silver effect. Think of it like a cloud. So when you're looking at rainbow holographic material, the typical rainbow material, if you look at it, say like on a flat surface, it predominantly looks silver, like a reflective silver foil. And it's only when you pick it up, move it, bend it, or get little dimples in it, you'll see this rainbow effect starting to take appearance. And that's what we're trying to simulate here, is more of a realistic effect. So you can change that appearance by putting more of the color coming through. And that is particularly useful if you're working with things like small areas, like, and I'll show you on another design later on, is things like working with the foil setting. So in the other video tutorial that we're going to do is on foil, so take a look at that. We'll specifically show you the rainbow in a small area and how that patchiness control will work better. So we've got the vibrancy. The craziness is the amplitude of the pattern, so we can make the pattern more subtle. So we could basically bring it right down. We could basically change the pattern down to patchiness down to 0 or 1.0 on that, which basically means it goes away. And we can then have this change color as we're moving. We can change the frequency, which is how quickly does that color change. So we could bring it right down, so it's kind of a slow change as we're moving it. So we've got like that yellowish color going into peaches, violets, etc. So you can see how it changes, more of a flat kind of effect. Putting in the pattern is basically how much of that effect is going to come in, and again we can put patchiness in here, so we can create a whole range of different effects based on what we perceive the substrate to look like. So maybe we've got it like that. So anyway, we've basically put in different effects for a whole range of things, and again we can always reset to defaults. When it resets to defaults, as I mentioned before, it will go to gloss coated. You can just toggle it back to rainbow. You could also play around. If you were, say for example, working with all this, and you play around with all of this and mess around with all the sliders, and then toggle off and then toggle back, it will go to the defaults. So do remember, if you are going to switch between them and you like your setting, do save it, otherwise you will lose your setting, because it will always reset to defaults. Okay, so that is how we work with the different types of base materials. So we've covered gloss coated, uncoated, foils, clears, rainbows, glitters, brush metal and plastics. And as and when we think of other things, we will develop them if we can do so, and we'll add it to the list. Any update that we bring out for the system will be free of charge. You would just download the new update for the app, and you would then have access to all the new materials. So that's how we work with using the different materials in using the Visualis3R software. And as you can see, how color works. If you put color over the top of the rainbow holographic, you get color shifting colored areas. It's as simple as that. So there we go, base materials and how it affects color.